Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ms. How are you guys?
Thank you.
I'm fine, thank you. Guys, before talking about a new lesson today, what should we do? We're supposed to talk about yesterday's lesson, which means we have to review about yesterday's lesson. So yesterday's lesson was about how to classify the triangles. Can somebody tell me, classifying triangles, how can I classify triangles? Out of how many types? How many types of triangles did we have yesterday? We talked about. Rose? How many types of triangles did we talk about? How many types? Yes, Arias?
We have 3 types of triangles.
Very good. So we classified triangles into 3 types. So the first type's name is Saline. Equilateral triangles. If you didn't know how to pronounce equilateral triangle, you can also say equilateral triangle. It will be easier for you to pronounce. So the first one is equilateral triangle. Why would we call it as an equilateral triangle? What's the reason? Yes, Rose?
Because it has 3 sides that are the same.
Very good. Because the equilateral triangle, can you clap for her, please? That's it. So the equilateral triangles, they have 3 equal sides. All the sides are the same as each other. So all the sides are the same. In which type of triangle? In equilateral triangle. Let's go to the second type of triangle. Yes, Mir? Very good. It's an isosceles triangle. Can you tell us why would we call it as an isosceles triangle? Very good. Can you clap for him? Okay, guys. So the isosceles triangle could be known as having 2 equal sides. That's why we call it as an isosceles triangle. What about the last and the third part of the third type of the triangle? Yes, Arias?
Scalene triangle. It has no equal sides.
Very good clap for Arias. So he talked to me about the third type of the triangle, the name, and also he talked to me about the reason why would we call it as a scalene triangle. The scalene triangle, which is the last type of the triangle, why would we call it as a scalene triangle? As Arias said, because it has no equal sides, the 3 different sides. Triangle could be called as the 3 different sides of a triangle could be called as
Scalene triangle.
Together.
Scalene triangle.
Okay, guys, so we talked about yesterday's lesson, we reviewed enough. Now we're supposed to go to a very new and a very important lesson, which is the last lesson of chapter 8. Chapter 8, lesson 8, nets for solid figures. Today's lesson, we will be talking about nets for solid figures. You might ask me, Ms. Dawan, what do we mean by net? What is the meaning of net? Actually, what are solid figures? Actually, what is the difference between solid figures and shapes? Actually, how many dimensions do I have? Okay, so today we will be talking about all. Hands down, focus on the board. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Look at that board.
1, 2, 3.
Listen to you.
Very good. First of all, let's talk about net. Guys, the net, it's an unfolded 3D shape. It is a flat. You might say, Ms. Dawn, what do we mean by 3D shape? Before talking about net, let me introduce you about 1-dimension and 2-dimensional shapes and also 3-dimensional shapes. The 3-dimensional shapes is the solid figure that it is our new lesson. First of all, before talking about this, we have to talk about 1, or let's write down in a word. So we have 1 dimension one-dimensional. And also the second one we have two-dimensional shapes. And then the third one, which is the solid figure, is three-dimensional shapes. Okay. What is one-dimensional shape? Actually, it is a shape. Listen to me, guys. One-dimensional, they could be a line segment. Or, so do I have two dimensions here? I have only one dimension, right? Yes. That's why we call it one-dimensional. What about the other one? For example, array. So what do we call this? It's a line segment. What about this one? It's array. We call it ray. Is it one dimension? It's one dimension. Let's draw another one, for example. What do we call it? It's a line. Why we call it a line? Because it doesn't have any endpoint. In line segment, you can find out two endpoints. And the line segment is a part of a line. The line segment, you can find out two endpoints. But in a line, you cannot find out endpoints. Both directions, they'll go on and on and on. That's why we have line here. So what do we call them? One dimension. What do we call them? One dimension. What do we call them? The line and the ray and line segments, what do we call them? One dimension. Very good. Let's go to the second part, which is two-dimensional shapes. You might ask me, Ms. Dewan, how could we find out two-dimensional shapes? What are the dimensions? I'll show them to you. For example, I'm going to draw. What do we call it? And I know it's not a perfect rectangle, but at least you know it's a rectangle, right? So what do we call it? Rectangle. So it is a shape. How many dimensions? Two. You might say, how, Ms. Dewan, show us the dimensions. Guys, in this rectangle, what do we have? We have the very long sides. What do we call the long sides? The long sides, we have length. So both of them could be called as a length. What about the wide sides? Rabin, very good. Clap for him. So the wide sides, they're a little bit shorter than the length ones. All the time, these two sides, the shorter ones, could be called as width. So what do we call them? Width. Because they're wider than the long ones. Okay. How many dimensions you found it here? Two. Very good. The first one is length. The second one is width. Because of this reason that we have length and width, that's why we call it as a shape, not a solid figure. It is a shape. Okay. Another shape here, what do we call it? Triangle. It's a triangle. Is it a shape or solid figure? Shape. It's a shape. Why? Because of having two dimensions. The first dimension here is the base one. What do we call it? The very, very down part, the bottom part, what do we call it? Base. What about here? Who's very clever to tell me? For example, if I want to ask you, from the very, very top in here, from the very bottom to the top, from here to here. So from the floor to the ceiling, what do we call it? From the floor to the ceiling, what do we call it? From the ground to the ceiling, here to the ceiling, what do we call it? Leah Adam. Clap for her. So we call it height. Okay. How many dimensions could you find in here? Two dimensions. The first one is base. The second one is height. Could we call it as a solid figure or shape? Why it's a shape? Because of having
2 dimensions.
Very good. Let's go to the third part. This part is the main part that today in our new lesson we really do need. 3-dimensional shapes, we also clap for him. We also, that's it, we also have a name. It's a solid figure. Actually, why we call it as a solid figure? Because I'm going to draw it first, and then after that, when I drew that to you, I'll show you how many dimensions I have it here. So I have, for example, I'm going to draw and somebody tell me. It has 3 dimensions. Okay. Guys, I'm going to show you the dimension. For example, one of the solid figures here, we call it as a rectangular prism. What do we call it?
Rectangular prism.
This is one of the solid figures. Today we will be talking about 5 of them. Rectangular prism, I have made them by myself yesterday. I know it's not a perfect. Why I didn't fold them to you hardly because I really want to show the net. That's why I didn't fold them nicely. We will open it. We will unfold it so as to show you the net. So this is the rectangular prism because of having 2 bases as rectangle shapes. And also this is a cube. Very good. And also we have 2 pyramids. This is the square pyramid, and that one's the triangle pyramid. So we will be opening them to you, unfold them to you to show you what is the net. And we have this one, we call it a triangular prism, because as you see, we have 2 triangle bases in here. That's why we call it as a prism. So it's a triangular prism. In here, we will be able to talk about how to show you the parts of. So, guys, from the very, what do we call it? First of all, let me show you this part. What do we call this part and this part? The very down part and the very top part. What do we call it? Guys, we call them bases. What do we call here?
Bases.
It's a base. It has 2 bases. Very good. And that one, it's a base too. Because of having 2 bases, that's why it could be called as a rectangular prism. Why we called it as a prism, this solid figure? It's not a pyramid, it's a prism. Why we call it as a prism? Arina.
Because it has 3 dimensions.
Very good. It has 3 dimensions. That's because of, we call it as a solid figure. And also, it has 2 bases. If we got 2 bases in a solid figure, could be called as a prism instead of calling it as a pyramid. It is not a pyramid, it's a prism. So, as you see, we have the height. Where is the height? From the very, very bottom to the top, we call it height. We call it height. What about the length and the width? The length, we know, the very long ones, we call them length, and the very, the wide sides, the shorter ones, we call them width. Did you now understand about the height? The height from here, from the very top to the very bottom, between two bases, we call them height. So this is the first dimension. The second dimension here, length. The third dimension here, we call it as width. Because of having length, height, and width, that's why we call it as three-dimensional shapes, which is solid figure. The name of this solid figure is a rectangular prism. Why would I not say it's a pyramid? But it's a prism. It's not a pyramid. Larine. And almost Rabin. Clap for him. It has two bases. Because of having two bases, that's why it could be called as a prism. Now you might ask me, Ms. Dewan, what is the pyramid? Before going to talk about pyramid, let me review this one to you, and then after that we will be talking about the pyramid. So one dimension we talked about line or ray or line segment. It's a one-dimension ones. The two-dimensional shapes, they have length and width, like rectangle and triangle, and also you can have a square. What about here, the three-dimensional shapes, the solid figures? We have three dimensions, length, width, and also height. You also can say they have bases also. But why would we know about if they got how many bases, or one base or two, more than one base? So as to make a difference between the pyramid and also the prism. Now, let me talk about five types of solid figures. We will be able to talk about 5 solid figures. Still, we're not talking about net, so we will be having a space for talking about net. Here, solid figures. You all know what are solid figures, right? You all know why would we call them as solid figures. Why would we do that? Because of having milad. Yes. The first type of solid figure is cube. The second type is rectangular prism. The third type is triangular prism. I'll show them to you. I have made them by myself. Triangular prism. The fourth part in here is the square pyramid. Square pyramid. See, it's not a prism, it's a pyramid. Square pyramid. And the fifth part is triangular pyramid, not prism. Okay, guys, how many solid figures should we talk about today in our new lesson? 5 solid figures. Cube, rectangular prism, triangular prism, square pyramid, and triangular pyramid. Let me make a difference between pyramid and prism here. So pyramid and prism. What is the difference between pyramid and prism? Guys, in pyramid, you only have one base. Two bases. This is the most popular point that makes a difference between the pyramid and the prism. For example, let us draw a pyramid and also let us draw a prism. For example, let me draw a square pyramid for you. So a square pyramid could be drawn like this way. I know it's not perfect, but yes. So what do we call this? Actually, who's very clever to tell me what would we call it as a square pyramid? I have two questions. Why a square pyramid, not a triangular pyramid? Second of all, why a square prism? Why not a square prism? Why we didn't say it's a square prism? Why we said it's a square pyramid? Yalla, clever ones. Why it's a square pyramid? Yes, Muhammad Abdul Samad.
Because pyramid has one base, but prism has two bases.
Very good. So how many bases could you find out in this solid figure?
We have only one base.
The base shape is?
Triangle. Square.
Clap for him. So the shape of the base here is what? It's a square. Basically, depending on a square base, the shape of the base is a square. Basically, depending on it, we call it as a square pyramid. Why square pyramid? Because we have only one base. The other sides, they will connect each other in one point. All the other sides will connect each other in one point. Let's go to talk about prism. For example, let's talk about the triangular prism. Let's talk about it here. Okay, so the triangular prism so what do we call it? So it's a triangular prism. Why it could, this solid figure could be called as a triangular prism? Why? I need a clever one. Lara.
Because it has two bases.
Two bases, very good. It has two bases. The first base here, what is the shape of the first base? Lara. The first triangle base number one. This is the base number one. And also the second base could be found in here. Both bases, there are two congruent shapes. Both of them are the same. They're congruent. This is base number two. So this is base number two, this is base number one. Basically, depending on the shape of the bases, that's why it could be called as a triangular prism. What do we call it?
Triangular prism.
Why it's a prism, but it's not a pyramid? This solid figure, it's a triangular prism. Why it's a triangular prism, but it's not a triangular pyramid? Who's very clever to tell me? Mir.
The reason that it's called a triangular prism because both of the bases are triangular shapes.
And how many bases did we find here?
2. That's why it's called prism.
Clap for him. Very good. So, because we have 2 triangle bases, and basically we have 2 bases, and each one of them is a triangle, in a triangle shape. That's why we call it as a triangular prism. Why it could be called as a square pyramid? Yes, Rose. Why it's a square pyramid? Very good. The square shape on the very bottom. How many bases could you find out in here? Only 1 base. Very good. Clap for her. So we have only 1 base. That's why it could be called as a pyramid. Okay, guys. Now, I'm going to draw you all the shapes here, or before drawing it, let me show them to you. Guys, as you see, this is a cube. So this is a cube. The rectangular prism, it's this. This is a rectangular prism, as you see. I'm going to show them to you, the other parts, and also I'll draw them to you. And the triangular prism, this is the triangular prism. Why it's a triangular prism, guys? Because we have 2 triangle bases. That's why we call it as a triangular prism. The square pyramid, and also the triangular pyramid. The square pyramid, basically it has a 1 base, a square base here. This is the square pyramid. And also the triangular pyramid, the base is in triangle. That's why we call it as a triangular pyramid. I have to show you the nets, guys. So in here, I'm gonna draw the cube for you. Guys, look at here. The cube is this is a cube, guys. How can I show you the net of this solid figure? This is the net. Now we'll be able to talk about net. How can I show you the net of this solid figure, of this cube? The net. The net, what is net? A net is an unfolded 3D shape, which is flat. Why it's unfolded 3D shape which is flat? Why it's unfolded? Why? I'm going to show it to you here. For example, if you see, this is a cube, right? How can I show you the net of the cube? Let's unfold it. This is the most important point, should be talked about in here, how to unfold it, how to show you the net. Guys. So, didn't we talk about this? What do we call it? It's a cube, right? Yes. How can I show you the net? It's the net. This is the net. The unfolded 3D shape. Is it a flat shape? Now, is it a flat? Yes. It's flat. And it's unfolded. That's why we call it, it's a net of the cube. This is net. When you unfold the shape, and then it will be net. How can I refold it again so as to make a square, a cube? Is it a cube now? Yes. Let's unfold it again. What do we call this? The unfolded part is? All of you. So this is a net of cube. Also, this is a triangle, square pyramid. Let me show you the net of the square pyramid. What do we call it now? It's a net. Net of what? A square pyramid. This is a square pyramid because of the square base, and they connect each other only in one part, in the very top. We don't have another base. We have only this base. So this base is square. That's why it could be called as a square pyramid. When you have a net, this is a net. What do we call this? It's unfolded, 3D shape, and it is a flat. Isn't it a flat? Yes. It's flat. So what do we call it? What do we call it? Net of what? Of a square pyramid. Why pyramid? Because of having only one base. Okay. So I'm going to show you the net of the other part also, the other pyramid. What do we call this pyramid? It's a triangular pyramid. Basically, why it's a pyramid? Because of having only one base. Let's unfold it. So what do we call it? Net of triangular pyramid. The net is unfolded, which is the net here. It's the net of the triangular pyramid. And then also show you the net of the triangular prism. Why it could be called as a prism, guys? Why it could be called as a prism? That's because we have, very good, because we have two triangle bases. And then I'm going to show you the net of it, which is so interesting. It's something like so interesting. Look at here, guys. So this is the net. What do we call it? Net of what? Two bases. Triangular prism. Why not pyramid, triangular pyramid? It's triangular prism because of having two triangle bases. What do we call it? Net of a triangular pyramid. Prism, sorry, not pyramid. Okay, thank you very much. So, can you clap for yourselves, please? For tomorrow, we will be talking about how to solve the exercises about this lesson. Thank you.